Now, are you sitting comfortably? Good, I'll begin. Because for centuries, children have been read fairy tales about Sleeping Beauty, Snow White and Little Red Riding Hood. But now there are claims they could be more harmful to young developing minds than the big bad wolf. The evolutionary biologist Richard Dawkins has questioned the wisdom of children being surrounded by tales of magic and fantasy. So should these stories now be confined to once upon a time? Fairy tales have existed for centuries as folklore spreading by word of mouth before they were ever written down. One of the earliest collections of stories was written by the Grimm brothers in 1812, and you'll recognise some of their famous tales, like Hansel and Gretel, Rapunzel and Little Red Riding Hood. Back then they were full of macabre and gruesome twists and endings. These days companies like Disney have sanitised them for a modern audience.
Why, Fauna, what's the matter, dear? Oh, I just love happy endings.
But recently some blockbuster films have honed in on those dark undertones, including Angelina Jolie's current movie based on Sleeping Beauty.
On her 16th birthday, she will fall into a sleep like death!
So centuries after they were first created, fairy tales are still having a big impact on children's imaginations. I'm joined now in the studio by Abby Longstaff, who is a children's author. Lovely to see you, Abby. Thanks for coming in. What do you think about this argument?
Well, I think fairy tales, there's a reason fairy tales have lasted so long for so many centuries. It's because they carry very important themes that children need to understand. And some of them are very positive. They're about love, friendship, survival, struggle. But some of them are very dark. They're violence and fear. And if you take a story like Snow White, for example, you've got a stepmother who's jealous and rejects a child, throws her out, so she's going to kill her. Now, these are things that actually do happen in everyday life. And, you know, children hear things on the news about children who've gone missing, children who've been killed or abused or hurt. And you can't read that kind of reality to a 3- or 4-year-old. So fairy tales provide a vehicle to talk about these sort of deeper issues to children, to make them think about stronger things and to deal with something they might be scared of themselves or something that's happening next door in their own family.
It's comments by Richard Dawkins that sparked this off. He is famously, he's an Oxford Don, but he's famously an atheist. He doesn't believe in God or religion. Do you think that the problem is that some of these stories do come from religious stories about there being good versus evil all the time?
I don't think good versus evil is necessarily only tied to religion. I mean, I think fairy tales didn't really come necessarily out of religious stories. They are across all cultures have got their tales. And you're right, there is a struggle of good and bad. And I think that it's a struggle that lasts today, because it's also about class. It's about a poor girl trying to get out of her circumstances by marrying up, which at the time was the only way for women to advance. I mean, now, of course, we've got education and things, but they're stories that strike a chord even in today's world. I don't think that, for me, they're not at all linked to religion.
I think the thing that you think is most important is that we just read stories to children. I have a 4-year-old, I do the same thing. She's obsessed with Frozen now, of course she is. But you think that's the real issue here? Yeah,
absolutely. I think children should read what they like reading. They should be read what they like to hear. And we should just encourage their love of books and their love of stories. And when they're hearing these fairy tales, they are learning about the structure of a story.
Abby, thank you so much for coming in. Good to see you.
Thanks for having me.